Morning, everybody. Welcome back to Sanhedrin. I want to dedicate this shiur to two very special people. One, Reb Harav Chanoch Ben Yisrael HaKohen Aaron Troy, Diane Aaron Troy, who passed away last week, who was a very, very special person indeed. My own particular family and connection with him goes back a very long way, and like many people, we owe him a very great debt of gratitude. He was a great man. His father, Rabbi Yisrael Aaron Troy, was the first principal of Jewish day school where I attended, and he himself was very involved in my family for many, many years, and he is a great loss to our community, and to the Jewish world. So we dedicate this shiur to his memory. And also another very special person, my father's yortzeit is on a Thursday night. Friday, Avi Mori Asher Chaim Ben Yaakov, 13 years ago, he passed away, and I want to dedicate the shiur to him as well. Hang on one second while I just give my wife the keys. Right, sorry about that, everyone. So let's carry on in Tchelet. Not why I talk about Tchelet, in Sanhedrin. Tchelet is in the background there. Let me straight away share the screen with you. We are at the bottom of Daf Yud Daled Amud Bet 14b, page 76 in the Steinsaltz, page 14b4 in the art scroll. There is the Gemarah on the screen. Can you see it? Yeah, great. Okay. Now, 2 weeks since we learned, because I was away last week. So we need a little bit of a refresher where we were up to. We were talking about how many valuers it requires for various different things. And we spoke last week or last time about valuing people, and that there were fixed valuations based on their value on the open market, if you like, on the open labor market. The Torah tells us that there were certain values to people. And if you were to make a vow to give a certain amount of money to the Bet HaMikdash, then you had to do that. So if you said, I vow to give 100 shekels, then you have to give 100 shekels. But if you say, I vow to give the value of this iPhone, that's actually, it's not an iPhone, it's a Samsung. I vow to give the value of this Samsung. So you're going to say to me, well, what version is it? Is it, the latest version, which is worth a lot of money, or is it an old rubbishy one that's, past its sell-by date and is not worth very much? Well, I don't know. So the Torah tells us, well, they don't know either. So we have to get a number of experts in to value the article, to tell us what the value is and how much I then am obliged to give to the Bet HaMikdash. Similarly, if a person was to sanctify a particular animal as a korban, and it turns out that that animal is not fit to be a korban, either because it's got a blemish or because it wasn't a kosher animal in the first place, then again, that animal has to be valued. and you redeem the value of that article and give the money to the Beit HaMikdash. That's what we were talking about how many valuers it requires for the various different articles. And what it was based upon was a pasuk, or various different pasukim in Sefer Vayikra, in the Parsha of Bechukotai, and I will share that with you right now. There we go. Hang on. Okay, there we go. We are in the Parsha of Bechukotai. Let's just read the pasukim. Jeffrey, if you're ready, if you would like to read from, let's go from verse 8 at the top of the page there.
But if he is too poor to pay the valuation amount, he shall stand him up before the Kohen, and the Kohen shall evaluate him according to how much the one who is vowing his value can afford. Now, if an animal of whose type is fit to be brought as an offering to the Lord, whatever part of it the person donates to the Lord shall become holy. He shall not exchange it or offer a substitute for it, whether it be a good one for a bad one, or a bad one for a good one. But if he does substitute one animal for another animal, both that one and its replacement shall be holy. And if it is any unclean animal of whose type shall not be brought as an offering to the Lord, then he shall stand up the animal before the Kohen. The Kohen shall then evaluate it, whether it is good or bad. Like the evaluation of the Kohen, so shall it be. But if he redeems it, he shall add its fifth to its value.
Carry on.
Because you moved it, I lost my place.
14.
It's okay. 14. And if a man consecrates his house to be holy to the Lord, the Kohen shall evaluate it, whether good or bad. As the Kohen evaluates it, so shall it remain. But if the one who consecrated it redeems his house, he shall add to it a fifth of its valuation money, and it shall be his. And if a man consecrates some of the field of his inherited property to the Lord, the valuation shall be according to its sowing, an area which requires a shomer of barley seed, a chomer of barley seeds at 50 silver shekels.
Okay, let's stop there. So you can see here, this is all about valuation, and we go to the Kohen. That's what it tells us. The Kohen evaluates it. And if you remember, we counted up the number of times in this entire passage that the word Kohen appears. Who can remember how many times it was altogether?
10.
Well done, Julia. 10 it was. Okay, 10 times the Kohen is mentioned. And the Gemarah that we ended with, let's go back to the Gemarah. Let me change the share on the screen. 1 second. There we go. So what we did last week was we said that our Mishnah, which we said earlier on, was like this. Ha-hekdeshot, where we are, little s, we'll go from there. Ha-hekdeshot bishlosha. The Mishnah teaches us that the valuation of consecrated property is performed by 3 judges. Okay. Now, what we said was, matnitin, our Mishnah that we've just quoted, which is what we started with 3 years ago on Daf Bet, Delaki Haitana. It's not like, it doesn't agree with the following Tana, the following rabbi, the Tanya, because we've learnt in a Braita. Here's our friend again, the obsessional, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Omer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Afilu tzinora shel hekdesh. Even a tzinora. Remember, we spoke about this word last time. It means a tzinor is a pipe, if you remember. And tzinora is some kind of small piece of equipment. Bubkas, we described it as last time. It's a very almost worthless object. Even this very, very low value object, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, shel hekdesh, if it belongs to the Bet HaMikdash, in other words, it's been consecrated to the Bet HaMikdash and you want to use it, you have to, as it were, redeem it. Effectively, what you're doing is buying it off the Bet HaMikdash. You're redeeming it and you're taking away its holiness and putting its holiness onto the money that you're going to give, and that money then goes to the Bet HaMikdash. It's a way of, if you like, releasing the holiness, redeeming the holiness. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, even this very low value object, Sricha Asara Bnei Adam Liftota, it needs 10 people to value it. Imagine that. You've got this tiny little bubka that's worth nothing, and it needs 10 people. And that's, as we said last time, it's consistent with the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion regarding the Egla Arufa. Remember the corpse that was found. He required not just a few judges to come and judge the distance. He required the king, the Kohen Gadol, and 71 members of the Sanhedrin. I mean, it's, he obviously was a very particular gentleman, and this is consistent with his view there. So what we ended with last week was the following. Amalei Rav Papa la Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya in a sort of side conversation, Bishlam ala Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I understand the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. I understand where he gets his 10 from, because Da'ama Kishmuel, he holds Ke like Shmuel. He holds like Shmuel. Da'ama Shmuel, because Shmuel said, Asara Kohanim Ktuvin b'parasha. Shmuel is the one that points out to us that there are 10 times the Kohen is mentioned in this parasha, and therefore that's a hint from the Torah that we need 10 people for whatever it is that you are evaluating. You need to have 10 people. That's Shmuel's opinion, and it's therefore understandable that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says that, because he is in accordance with Shmuel. And this is where we ended off last time with a question. We posed the question, Ela l'Rabbanan. But what about according to the rabbis of our Mishnah, in brackets, who says what? Who say that we need 3. Shlosha mana lahu. Where do they get the idea that we need 3 from? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he may be obsessional, but at least he's got some logic behind him. He's holding like Shmuel. Right at this moment, it seems to me that the rabbis of our Mishnah have just plucked 3 out of thin air. Where have they got this 3 from? And that's where we left it last time with the question. And now we're going to learn the answer. So here the Gemarah now says, V'chi tema. Now that's a Gemarah expression where it is going to propose an answer and immediately reject it. And the way the language works is like this. So if I'm having a discussion with you about something, and I can see that you have got a counter argument, I'm going to get my retaliation in first. And I'm going to say, and if you'll say to me this, well, I'll say back to you that. So don't even bother going there. And that's what this v'chi tema means. V'chi tema means, and if you will say, right? And if you're going to say, the Gemarah says, that the reason that the rabbis say we have 3, diktiv behu shlosha, because in that particular section of the parasha that Jeffrey just read out, it's split into three sections. One for valuations of people, one for valuations of things, what we call metaltalin, which means anything other than land. Anything other than land is called metaltalin, which is usually translated as movable objects, which is not necessarily a good translation, because something that's very, very heavy and not movable, if it's not land, is actually still called metaltalin. So metaltalin is actually, although it means movable objects, it means anything that isn't land. So that parasha that Jeffrey read out is split into three: valuations of people, valuation of things, and valuation of land. And what we find, if you look carefully, I'm not going to go back to it now because we'll be flitting back and forth and it's a bit of a nuisance, but take my word for it. What you'll find is the valuation of people, the word Kohen is mentioned 3 times. Valuation of things, the word Kohen is mentioned 3 times. Valuation of property, it's mentioned 4 times. That makes up the 10, okay? So the Gemarah has asked the question, where do the rabbis get 3 from? That we need 3 for these metaltalin, these movable objects, i.e. the animals that have been consecrated, or the little spinning fork or whatever it is that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov uses as his example, a thing, a non-person and a non-piece of land. They say 3. And where do they get it from? And if you'll say v'chi tema, and if you'll say dichtiv b'hu shlosha, because in that section it mentions the word Kohen 3 times, that sounds like a good excuse, a good answer. So if you'll say that, I will say back to you, so don't even go there, right? I will say back to you, karkaot, what about land? Karka is land, okay? Karkaot, what about land? Dichtiv bahu arba'a. We just said in the section about land, Kohen is mentioned how many times? 4. So you'll say to me, well, we need 4. We must, if we need 3 for things, because it mentions it 3 times, then we should need 4 for land, right? Says the Gemarah, tisge ba'arba. Then we should need 4 times. It should be enough that we've got 4. Only the problem is in the Mishnah, the next few words says, V'chitema hachinami alma tnan hakarkaot tish'a v'chohein. The problem is that the Mishnah says for land you need 9, tish'a, 9 and a kohen. 9 and a kohen. No. So it's not 4. So your argument that things should be 3 because there are kohens mentioned 3 times, says the Gemarah, if you're going to bring me that argument, don't even bother, because then you would need to have 4 for land, and we know it's not 4 for land because the Mishnah, the same rabbis that say 3 for things, say 9 plus a kohen for land. So that can't be the answer. So with Gemarah using the expression v'chi tema, and if you're going to say, has raised a possible answer and rejected it. Okay. So try again, says the Gemarah to itself. Elamai. Okay. So maybe it's like this. Demashlami bahu asara. That word mashlami, what word can you see in the middle of that? What's the root of that word? Anyone? Have a guess. Yes, go on, Avril. Go on, Avril.
Shalem, whole.
Shalem, whole, correct. Correct. Shalem means whole. It also means peace, of course. Shalom means peace. Why does shalom mean peace? Because when you're at peace, you are whole. Okay, you are completed. So the word shalem means also, what does it mean?
It means to pay. To pay.
To pay.
Hey,
That's right. Why is l'shalem to pay?
Because you completed the transaction.
Absolutely, because you have completed the transaction. That is the root of the word shalem, to pay, and shalem meaning whole or complete. Here, it's the same idea. De mishalmi bahu asara. The whole section about this Kohanim doing the valuation is completed up to 10. In other words, the 4 that we add in at the end for land, we start with 3 for people, 3 for things, and 4 for land. Those 4, as it were, make up, complete the number 10. And that's why we need 10 for land, because when we add the 4 in, we make 10. So that's why we need Tisha, 9, plus a Kohen. So that's nice, yeah? That fits now. We're all happy that the Mishnah fits with our, it's 3 for things, because it was 3 there. And it's 10 for Karka, because it makes it up to 10. Wonderful, says the Gemarah. Not wonderful. No, there's a problem with that. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that we didn't look carefully enough. Because if we look carefully enough, what we will see is that we started off with people, which was 3. We then went on to things, which were 3. And we then went on to land, which was 4. If you are going to say that land makes up the number to 10, and therefore we need 10 for land, when you make up things, it should be how many, Julia?
It should be 6.
It should be 6, correct. It should be 6 because the 3 of the things make up 6, because we've already had 3 before the for the people. So if we were being consistent, we would have to say, according to this opinion of the Gemarah, we would have to say 3 for things, 3 for people, 6 for things, and 10 for land. Okay, if we were being consistent. And that's what the Gemarah's objection is to this now. So it says, Elamai, what's going on here? Sorry, you're going to tell me that makes it up to 10. Oh dear. What about hekdeshot? What about things? Demishalmi bahu shita. Taf and shin are interchangeable from Hebrew to Aramaic. So if you change that taf to a shin, what do you get? Not shita, you get
6. Shisha.
shisha, which means 6. So shita is Aramaic for 6, because that taf becomes a shin, as it were, shisha. So you should get 6. Liba'u shita. So therefore, we should only require, we should require 6 for things. And we've just said before that according to the rabbis, it's 3. How are we going to get out of that? Says the Gemarah, kasha, taka. That's a difficult one, says the Gemarah. I don't know. I don't know. You don't know the answer. So the question was, where do the rabbis get their opinion that it's 3 from? And the Gemarah's conclusion is, we don't know. Now, in that scenario, we seem to have lost somebody there. I think we've just lost Jeffrey. Anyway, in that scenario where we have an opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, whose opinion is logical and supported by an opinion of Shmuel, and we have an opinion of the rabbis whose logic in coming to that conclusion we have not been able to fathom, what do you think would be the logical thing to do in terms of the halakha? Michael, what do you think would be the halakha? Julia, you were going to say?
Well, to go with Rabbi Eliezer, which is logical.
Well, I would.
Extreme.
If it was me, I would go with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov because he has proved his case. But we don't. The halacha is actually according to the rabbis because generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, we go according to the majority. The rabbis outweigh Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, and it's in a Mishnah versus a Brisa. So the Mishnah usually takes precedence over a Brisa. And what we say is, interestingly, the way it works is this. We don't say, like I just persuaded you to do, Julia, and I said myself, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's got logic and the rabbis haven't. What we actually say is, it's us that are lacking. We don't understand the rabbi's logic. We just haven't got it. They did have logic, obviously, or else they wouldn't have said that. That was their opinion. We just don't understand it. And so instead of saying their logic is faulty, we say we don't understand their logic. There's a very significant, subtle, but very significant difference in approach there. And it's, I suppose it's one of humility of us, even in the Gemarah, saying, well, okay, remember the Gemarah was written 300 or 400 years after the Mishnah, and the Gemarah is saying, well, it's difficult this, I don't understand what the rabbis of the Mishnah were, how they came to that conclusion, but we accept that that is their conclusion because they are greater rabbis than us because they're from a previous generation that was closer to the source. So we don't say, it's a bit, the reason I'm laboring this point is because in the modern world, we tend to talk about standing on the shoulders of others, meaning that, you know, whoever's making the latest car or the latest plane doesn't start from scratch. You start with what the previous car makers or plane makers have done, and then you modify and refine their work. And therefore your work becomes more sophisticated with each version, as it were. So, you know, sort of the Model T Ford, the first Ford, was not as sophisticated as the next one and the next one and the next one. Whereas what we're saying here is we are giving greater authority to the older generations because they were closer to the source of the oral law before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote it down. So that's how it ends. That particular bit ends, and we then move on to another subject. So just to summarize that before we do move on, we were talking about we were explaining the psukim in Parshat Bechukotai, which talked about the valuations of people, things, and land, and how that is done. Our Mishnah said it took 3 judges or three valuers, not judges, 3 valuers for things, 3 valuers for people, and 10 valuers for land, one of which had to be a Kohen. There doesn't appear to be any clear logic as to how they arrive at those figures, but we accept them that's what they are. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said everything needs 10, consistent with the opinion of Shmuel and consistent with his own approach to the Egla Arufa, which it seems to be, at least compared to everybody else, a little bit over the top. So, any questions on that section of the Gemarah before we move on to the next bit, which is linked to it, but slightly different? Any questions? No. Okay, let's move on then. So, if we go back to the Mishnah, we will see that what we said was, well, let's go right back to the Mishnah. Let's see. Let me go right back to the Mishnah on the screen. There we go. Right, on the screen, we're onto the Mishnah. Those of you that want to actually look at the Mishnah, it's on the very first page. We learnt it 3 years ago in November of 2019. And here we go. This is what we just did now. Hahekdeshot bishlosha. The hekdeshot, that's the things, the movable things, are valued by 3. Now, we have to look at the next words very, very carefully, because the next piece of Gemarah is difficult because it talks about grammatical makeup of the next few words. So we have to look very carefully at these words, which is why I put them on the screen. These are the 3 words we're going to be dissecting over the next week or two. Ha'arachin hamitaltelim bishlosha. Now, Rav Steinsaltz translates that as the valuations that are movable property are performed by 3 judges. The valuations that are movable property are done by 3 judges. And it quotes our psukim that Jeffrey read out for us earlier on, Leviticus 27, 1-8. Okay. Ha'arachin hamitaltelim bishlosha. Arachin, erech, we spoke about that. That was value. Hamitaltelim. I explained to you what that was. It's movable objects, things that aren't property. So the valuations that are movable property take 3 judges. Right, that's what we're going to be discussing. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Here it is. The Gemarah, when it quotes that, just gives you the first word, ha'arachin. Why does it do that? Because remember, there were very few written copies of the Gemarah, way before the printing press. Gemarah was written, 900 years or so before the invention of the printing press. So any copies of the Gemarah had to be handwritten. So it was written in shorthand. And the second thing was, because there were so few copies of it, people learned it off by heart, which is why, as we spoke about a week or two ago, there is such a emphasis in the Haredi world on learning stuff off by heart, because that's how it was always done. In order to know it, because it wasn't easy. Certainly you couldn't go onto Sefaria, and certainly you couldn't go into a bookshop and buy a book of the Gemarah. They were very, very precious manuscripts. So you're meant to know the Mishnah off by heart. So when the Gemarah just says ha'arachin, you are meant to know that it means those 3 words that we looked at in the Mishnah earlier, which we've even forgotten. We can't even remember it from 1 second to the next, never mind remember it forever. Ha'arachin ha'metaltelim bishlosha. That's what we're meant to be read. And you can see this little abbreviation here, chaf vav. Ha'arachin, chaf vav, and a little chubchik. Anybody know what that stands for? See that? You'll see that a lot. Chaf vav and a little chubchik. Can you see that? Anybody know what that stands for?
Is it etc.?
It is etc. Very good. It is etc. And what is the word that it's short for? It's not etc. because that's Latin. Have a guess.
Is it
Anyone?
coal? Coal.
Yes, very good. Chula. Okay, chula means etc. because it comes from the word kol, meaning all. So ha'arachin and all the rest of it. Okay, so etc. If any of you have ever been to a wedding where Rav Ido, our esteemed previous rabbi of our shul, is honored with reading the Ketubah, you will hear him say, when he gets to the bit where everybody's interested in, which is in how much money they've put down in the Ketubah, he will say, and he says, he reads out the Ketubah, and he gets to that bit, and he'll say, and the Chatan promises to give, v'chula, 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 etc., 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 and you don't get to hear how much it is. It's all a bit of a swizz, really. But v'chula, v'chula, v'chula. So that means etc., etc. So this is ha'arachin, etc., and here the etc. is hamataltalin bishlosha. So the Gemara is asking now, it's going to really dissect down into these three words and see what it's talking about. My arachin hamitaltalin. What does it mean? Valuations that are movable property. Now, you have to understand a little bit of background here. So I'm going to stop the share so that you can concentrate on looking at me instead of the Gemara for a second. There are two types of vows that you can give. You can vow to give the worth of something, of an object, and that is called damim. Damim, and I'm assuming that it's the same root as blood, and I guess that's because the blood is it's a life force of a person. So damim means the value. So you can make a vow about the damim, about the value of something. So I can make a vow that I will give the damim, the value of this phone, to Hekdesh, to the Beit HaMikdash, or to the shul, or whatever. I can also make a vow about the erech, which we said was another word for value. But in halakha, you can only make an erech vow about a person. Okay, it doesn't work in English because the word value is the same word, value or value. But in Hebrew, there's two different words. There's erech, which applies to the value of a person, and there's damim, which applies to the value of of things. And you see that in Hebrew quite often, where there's different words for the same thing. The English only has one word for, or similar things like that. So the question here is, when it says my arachin hamataltalin, what does it mean when somebody makes an erech vow on a movable object? The Gemara is saying, you can't. There's no such thing. It's not a proper vow. You can't vow on an erech of a thing. You can only vow on a damim of a thing or an erech of a person. So if I say I'm going to give the erech of this phone, the erech of this phone is nothing, because there's no such thing. Make any sense? So that's the question that the Gemara is asking right now. So let's go back to the screen. My arachin hamitaltalin. What does it mean, this erech value thing of movable property? So the Gemara comes up with a first answer. I'll give you a spoiler. It's going to be rejected. Okay, here it goes. Amar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav. Rabbi Gidel says in the name of Rav, Ba'omer erech kli ze alai. What he's saying is that the valuation of this utensil is on me. Let's just go on to Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, because Rav Gidel says in the name of Rav. Let's on to over the page now, making rapid progress. Ha'omer, he says, erech klize alai notein damav. Somebody who says this nonsensical vow, the erech of a thing is on me, he's basically made a mistake. He meant to say damim or damav, its value. He just used the wrong expression. So, for instance, in English, I've just thought of this example now. If I say to you, Jeffrey Glasky, can you please borrow me 100 shekels? You'll say, that doesn't make any sense. What I meant was, can you lend me 100 shekels? But you knew what I meant. I said the wrong word because I'm ignorant and I don't know English properly. But you understood what I meant. And I'm sure you've all heard people say, can you please borrow me this or borrow me that? And you knew that they meant, can you lend me? Or to be absolutely accurate, if Michael Leaf was here, he would be on me like a flash. Can you lend to me? You can't borrow to me, but you can lend to me 100 shekels. So if I say, can you borrow me 100 shekels? You know I mean, can you lend me 100 shekels? So Rav Gidel, who clearly is not of the same personality of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, because he would certainly not be going along with this sloppiness of phrase, that Rav Gidel Amar Rav, Rav Gidel says in the name of Rav, we know what he meant. Don't be so pedantic. When he said the erech of a thing, when a person says the erech of the thing, he meant the damim. He didn't know. Either he didn't know that you've got to use that word, or he made a mistake. What's the point of saying? Nobody says a vow which has got no meaning whatsoever. There's no point. Why would you say such a thing? It's clear that he meant damav, that he meant the value of this thing in the correct word. My tama, what's the reason for that? Why does Rav Gidel say such a thing? Adam yodea she'ein erech likli. A person knows that there's no such thing as an erech, as that type of valuation when it comes to a thing, a vessel, a movable object. V'gamar v'amar l'shum damim. And therefore he must have known in his head what he wanted to do, which was to give the valuation of this thing, and he used the wrong word. Big deal. He used the wrong word. We knew what he meant. Mishum hachi notein damav. Therefore, the halacha says if you use the wrong word, it doesn't invalidate it. We know what you meant, and we accept your vow, and actually it becomes a vow. If you were to go to a bet din later on and say, actually, I knew that it was a nonsense word. I didn't mean damav. It was a nonsense vow. Then two things. Number one, you would not be liable for the value, because Rav Gidel could not say his pshat, his explanation, that what you meant was the value, because you've said specifically, I didn't mean that. But if you do that, then you have transgressed a very serious transgression, which is what? Say again, Julia, unmute.
Misleading.
It's to do with vows, but I can't remember the.
It is to do with
word.
Vows. If
Blee, whatever.
If you look in the back of your Yom Kippur Machzor at the detailed explanation, either in Art Scroll or in Koren, I'm sure you've all probably got at least one of those, an art scroll or a Koren, you'll find that there is an al-chet that we say about taking vows. And the explanation that's written there is that it is forbidden to make a vow which has no meaning. And it's forbidden to make a vow which is obvious. So, in other words, if you say, I vow in God's name that this is a cup, well, that may be true, and you haven't, as it were, literally taken God's name in vain because you haven't said something false, but that is taking God's name in vain. You've made a vow which was unnecessary. So it is a serious aveira to make an unnecessary vow. And so if you go to the Beit Din afterwards and say, Rav Gidel was wrong in my situation, I did not mean to say damav, I meant to say erech, and I knew it was a nonsense vow, then you don't have to give the money, but you have admitted to a very serious aveira. By the way, that is why you will find that many Orthodox Jews, when they go to court, will not take the oath. They will prefer to affirm. Jeffrey Glasky is smirking there because I know exactly what he's thinking, but it's not the case, Jeffrey. They choose to affirm, not because they are not going to tell the truth, but because they don't want to take a vow which may be an unnecessary vow, because they may be asked questions which are obvious and they have vowed and it's part of this vow. So many Orthodox Jews will choose to affirm rather than to swear on the Bible for that particular reason, so that they are not involved in taking vows at all. Vows are very, very important in halacha. We treat them very lightly today, but if you read the Torah, there's tons of stuff about vows in the Torah. The vows are very, very important. A man's word is absolutely vital in Jewish law. There's a separate mitzvah, as well as not taking vows incorrectly. There's a separate mitzvah, midvar sheker tirchok, which means from a untrue matter. Sheker is a lie. Tirchok, you shall distance yourself. In other words, you have to go out of your way to avoid a lie. It's almost like it's not just don't lie, it's go out of your way to distance yourself from a lie. So in Judaism, you might find this surprising given the behavior of some of our co-religionists, but in Judaism, the truth and telling the truth and a person's word and vows are absolutely fundamental to our religion, and it's the basis, of course, of all modern society. Modern society is based on the truth, and that's a whole court system, which is why a person has to swear or affirm and promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So the reason that people, Orthodox Jews, tend not to swear on the Bible is and prefer to affirm, which the affirmation is without an oath. It's I solemnly promise that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, without the swearing on the Bible, is because of this business of vows. So how did we get into all that? Because Rav Gidel says that when he made this vow, he had something else in mind. He didn't mean erech, because that's a nonsense vow. You can't make a vow on an erech of a thing because there's no such thing. What he meant was damav, its value. Okay, asks the Gemara, well, okay, if that's the case, I've got a problem with the language. Remember, I said to you to look at the language very carefully. Mishum hachi noten demake. Hi arachina metaltalin. In that case, says the Gemara, if we accept what he meant was the value of a metaltalin, the erech of a metaltalin, why does it say arachin ha-metaltalin, which means valuations that are movable property? It should have said arachin shel metaltalin, the valuation of movable property. That word, those words, arachin ha-metaltalin, valuations that are movable property, doesn't make sense, according to what Rav Gidel says. According to Rav Gidel, it's the valuation of the thing. Arachin shel metaltalin. There, look at that word there, shel, meaning of. Okay, it's a different grammatical makeup of the expression. Arachin shel metaltalin, mi ba'ile. It should have said, we require. Mi ba'ile means we require. We require it to say this. And what's the answer? The Gemarah's answer? It's a great answer. Tani, the Gemarah says, you're right. We'll amend the Gemarah, we'll amend the Mishnah. The Mishnah should have said, arachin shel metaltalin. So it makes a whole business about what it says. And then it says, you know what? You're right. Whoever wrote the Mishnah down, they were writing it in shorthand. They missed out the word shel. It should have been in there. It's an emendation. Do you know the difference between an emendation and an amendment? Who knows the difference between an emendation and an amendation?
Is one a correction and one an addition?
Yes, exactly. An emendation is a correction of something that should have been like that in the first place. An amendment is something that you do as a result of new information, new evidence, and new thinking. So this is an emendation. See, we've learned Hebrew grammar, we've learned English grammar. Wow, what a fascinating subject Gemarah is.
Can I ask you something? Why the word aruchin for valuations, but you said that of movable property, but you said that erech describes persons. So isn't that the wrong word, aruchin?
Erech describes person in a vow. Erech can mean valuation, but when it comes to vowing the valuation of things, it can only be, erech can only be for a valuation of a person. You can use the word erech to mean a valuation of a thing, but you can't make a vow on an erech. When you make a vow, there's certain specific language that you've got to use when you make a vow. Like when we make the oath in court, right? You can't just make your own oath up. You've got a piece of card that the clerk holds up for you. And if you don't know it off by heart, you read it because you've got to write the exact thing. When I write my medical reports, there is a paragraph, a statement of truth that I have to write at the end, and I have to sign that. And it has to be exactly the lashon that they give me. And in October 2020, they changed it. They put another little sentence in there. After that, it's not a court compliant report unless it's got the exact wording in it. And it's the same with the vows. The vows of valuations have to use the correct language, and they can't use the word erech for a thing, even though in the vernacular, in describing the valuation of a thing, you can use that word, but as a vow, it doesn't work. Understood? Okay. So the Gemarah says that in the end, whoever wrote the Mishnah down, remember the Mishnah was redacted by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It was a collection of the Torah Shebaal Peh written down in sort of semi-shorthand form so that it wouldn't get forgotten. And what the Gemarah is now saying is, and to be honest, this is a backs against the wall explanation of the Gemarah. It's not a common explanation. It's not rare, but it's not a common explanation, because usually, as we've found out already in our 14 pages that we've done, the Gemarah bends itself over backwards, contortioning itself in order to make opinions fit with one another. They don't like to have confrontation and things that don't agree. So it's only when they've got nowhere else to go, as it were, that they say, well, you're right. It doesn't make sense to say arachin hamitaltelin. And therefore, the Mishnah should have said in the first place, arachin shel mitaltelin, only whoever wrote it down missed it out, or in the intervening 400 years, that word shell has fallen out for some reason, and it is there, and therefore an emendation of the Mishnah, meaning that that's how it should have been in the first place. Okay, that's a good place to stop, because we're going to next time we're going to have a different explanation of what this word arachin hamital, these words arachin hamitaltelin mean. As you can see over here, the next few words, Rav Chisda Ama Avimi. Rav Chisda is going to give a different explanation, which we will do next time. So just to summarize what we've done today, we've understood that where did we start? We started over here, that the rabbis wanted 3 for things, which meant that if they were logical, they wanted 4 for land, because of the number of times Cohen was mentioned, but actually they want 10 for land, and it should have been 6. And the Gemarah did not have an answer to that, and it was left as a difficulty. We then went on to the valuation of things, and we understood that there are 2 words for valuation in Hebrew, erech and damim. When you make a vow, damim is the word you have to use for things, and erech is the word you have to use for people. So if you make a vow on an erech, on a thing, it's a nonsense vow. It doesn't make any sense. But Rav Gidel says, we know what you meant. What you meant was damim, and you have to pay. And then the Gemarah says, well, if that's the case, the language is wrong. There's a shell missing. Arachin shel mitaltelin. And the Gemarah eventually says, you're right. It is missing. We will amend the Mishnah, and we will now have the Mishnah reading arachin shel mitaltelin. And that was Rav Gidel's opinion, said in the name of Rav. Next time we will go on to another opinion, Rav Chisda, in the name of Avimi. Any questions or comments regarding today's exciting episode of Grammar and Gemarah? Well, have you noticed that? That's the same root, same letters, Gemarah and Grammar. How interesting. Another piece of nonsense for you.
So
okay.
You're really saying, basically, unlike your legal reports, where if you make a mistake, the whole report goes into the bin effectively. Under Jewish law, the halacha says that if you've made a mistake in error, then that you're still bound by it.
According to Rav Gidel's opinion on this situation, you could certainly deduce that. Yes, that's what Rav Gidel is saying. Rav Gidel is saying that don't be silly. We know what he meant. I can almost imagine a situation where, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov comes along with Rav Gidel, and they're having a discussion. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no, he doesn't have to give anything because that he wasn't careful enough. He wasn't. It was a nonsense vow. He's not said anything. It was a mistake. He's not said anything. If he wants to vow, he'll have to do it all over again and use the right words. And Rav Gidel says, oh, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, don't be such a pedant. We know what he meant, right? He meant this. He meant that word. He said the wrong word. Big deal. We know what he meant. We'll accept his vow, and we need to take the pledge. We'll take the pledge off him. You can imagine that sort of, and it's a personality thing. I think you do get the, and you see it in law as well. In English law, I've been in courts where the judges have been both ways, either really pedantic on tiny little points, either points of law or points of language, and other judges have taken the broader view and said, what is the spirit of the law here? What is it that clearly was meant by this expression or these words or whatever it was, and that's what I'm going to accept. And I think it's it's two different opinions, and that's what I suppose makes life so exciting that we're all different, aren't we? And Rev Gidel can be exasperated with Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov's pedantry, and Rebbe Eliezer ben Yaakov can say to Rav Gidel, you know, you really need to concentrate more, mate. And you could just picture what went on. I don't know if they were contemporaneous. They probably weren't, actually. But if they were, you can sort of imagine the situation, sitting cross-legged on the floor in Yavne somewhere, having this discussion. We should, you know, perhaps make a play about it. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, until next time, I shall bid you a fond farewell. Wait a minute, next week, are we back? Monday, Sunday, Monday. Yes, we should be back for Wednesday next week, should be okay for the show. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.